next few months, millions of people will think twice before they venture outside. The hay fever season is about to start.
Doctors are warning the hospital system won't cope.
Doctors say it's the worst allergy season in years
because warmer temps are extending the window for pollen release.
Hay fever is making the headlines. This common allergy affects millions worldwide, but there's a lot we don't know about it. This is Decomplicated. What is hay fever? We all enjoy packing away our winter clothes at the start of spring to enjoy the sun. But for millions, this period marks the beginning of the potent allergy season, which can stretch on for weeks or even months. Hay fever is also known as allergic rhinitis. It's the most common form of a non-infectious irritant of your sinuses, and it affects around 1 in 4 adults in the UK during seasonal bursts.
Hay fever is an allergy to pollen. And depending on the time of year, you can work out which pollen might be causing your symptoms. So if you get hay fever in the spring, it tends to be tree pollen, especially birch pollen. So birch pollen keeps me very busy. And then May, June, July, you're thinking about grass pollen. And then in the latter part of the summer, you're thinking about weed pollen. You want to be thinking about eyes and you want to be thinking about nose. So itchy eyes, itchy nose, sneezing. In children, often the eyes will dominate over the nose, while in adults, often the nose dominates over the eyes.
What causes hay fever? Allergic reactions happen when your immune system reacts to a foreign substance that doesn't cause a reaction in most people, such as pollen or certain foods.
The pollen is inhaled, and you've got cells lining your nose, which are called mast cells. And the pollen goes in like a key in the lock, and it opens the mast cell, and the mast cell releases histamine and all other kinds of chemicals, and that's what will cause your symptoms in the first place.
I suffer more from tree pollen than grass pollen.
Oh, that's interesting. There's a distinction. I did not know that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Some of the seasons are getting worse, but that's primarily the tree pollen season. And that's because we're seeing increased warmth in June. We are seeing increasingly severe birch pollen seasons, and some of the other trees as well are also being affected, like hazel and alder. And we can see that continuing as a trend moving forward over at least the next two decades.
Beaches are great destinations for allergy sufferers, as ocean breezes tend to be free of allergens. But shifting weather patterns might put more than just a dampener on a sunny seaside retreat.
5 years ago, thunderstorm asthma killed 10 Victorians. Wild weather and a high pollen count are the perfect storm for asthma.
Ryegrass pollen is normally too big to get into the lower airways, and as the storm blew in, it sucked up thousands of tons of ripe pollen.
And all of a sudden I got really breathless and got really frightened and didn't know what to do.
Cities are rife for hay fever outbreaks. For instance, hay fever exploded in Tokyo following World War II due to the drive to plant cedar trees for use as fuel and lumber. Hay fever affects around 40% of the Japanese population, which costs their economy billions each year as hay fever cases continue to rise. Who discovered hay fever? Liverpool, 1819. Dr. John Bostock presented a study to his fellow academics detailing the case of periodical affection of the eyes and chest. His subject, a patient known only as JB, described symptoms known only too well by hay fever sufferers today.
It's quite detailed about this patient who, from the age of 8, every year from the middle of June onwards, suffered a range of symptoms, including, as he termed it, heat and fullness in the eyes, a discharge of tears, intense itching and smarting, a discharge of a very copious thick fluid, and tightness of the chest and difficulty in breathing. But that patient was actually Bostock himself. Bostock had tried lots and lots of different things to try and get relief from his hay fever symptoms. So things like bleeding, which is, as it sounds, removing blood from the body, purging, which is making yourself vomit or giving yourself diarrhoea. Those were both very old ideas that were believed to balance fluids in the body. The idea was that you had these certain fluids and you need to keep them in balance to stay well. He took kind of things that we might almost term as supplements, so iron, opium, mercury, but he did think, I guess probably from his own experience and from talking to other patients who suffered similarly, he thought that there was a connection with grasses. He talks about an idea that has very generally prevailed, that it, as in the catarrh, is produced by the effluvium from new hay. So we get the idea of the link with hay, with kind of grass and plants in his writing. But it wasn't until another sort of 40 years later, another Dr. Charles Blackley, who was also a hay fever sufferer, so you can see kind of where people have been encouraged to look into this. So he did an experiment where he got some pollen and put it in his eye to prove that that was what was causing it. And you can imagine that was probably quite unpleasant, but I think that is where we have the direct link rather than the speculative link.
Global warming and hay fever.
Climate change, and in particular global warming, is doing two major things to plants. One, it's changing when they flower, so spring flowers are typically flowering earlier in the year. And it's also changing the abundance of particular plant species. So some species are increasing in abundance and some species will decline in the face of climate change.
It's very interesting that the birch pollen levels are dramatically increasing. All of a sudden we're seeing 2 to 3-fold increases in the amounts that we're getting.
People are experiencing the pollen counts much higher early in the season, and that's been stretching the hay fever season out then from early spring straight through to late summer.
So you've got longer pollen seasons and you've got more pollen being produced by plants. And potentially, if we get warmer still, we may find that certain plants which in other countries might cause hay fever, so one of them is ragweed, might come across to the UK and people might start also developing allergies to newer pollens.
What helps with hay fever symptoms?
They may look odd, but at least they're not sneezing.
So the first step you want to think about is, can you do anything to actually reduce your exposure to pollen? So simple things like, don't bring the garden in with you. When you are coming into the house, have a shower, put those clothes in your wash basket so you're not actually covered in pollen. The next stage is antihistamines. You want to take the newer antihistamines like cetirizine, loratadine, fexofenadine, because they are more effective. Things like Piriton are over 70 years old. They're more effective, and in addition, they're less likely to sedate you and to slow reaction times. And then the next stage is using a nose spray. You can get some from your GP or you can buy them over the counter. And the tips there, use it before the pollen season begins. Use it regularly.
Battling the body's reaction to external intruders is no mean feat. For a large portion of those with hay fever, no remedy currently exists. But that might all be about to change.
And the research that we're doing here at Imperial particularly focuses on trying to see how we can desensitize patients who have summer hay fever with the allergen that they're sensitized to.
Dr. Shamji and his team of researchers at Imperial College London are working on effective treatments for hay fever sufferers, particularly those that don't respond well to current treatments. Through their research, they've discovered that a short course of treatments may acclimatise the body to hay fever and lessen symptoms for a number of years between doses.
They don't have to take the antihistamine, they can enjoy going to the park, be socialised, but also being able to just have a good night's sleep. The hope is that when we are treating patients with allergen immunotherapy, we're able to really prevent these asthma exacerbations. I think we are much closer to have novel therapeutics that are very much geared towards precision medicine and personalised medicine.